Welcome back to the Encyclopedia Show. We're doing it on Wyoming this month, which is very convenient. We're also interviewing you in the basement apartment of my residence. I hope you don't mind being underground. But
love it,
that's good. It's your natural state. Yeah, that's good. That's good. It's very convenient that the Encyclopedia Show is about Wyoming this month because you just had an exciting experience with Wyoming. But before we get into the exciting experience, I don't want it to be like we hate Wyoming, right?
Right.
So I would like, what are some of the best things about Wyoming?
Well, Wyoming is the most beautiful state. It's absolutely gorgeous to look at, and over on the western part of Wyoming, where the unbelievable mountains. I've been camping there, and it's just beautiful. And Harrison Ford lives in Wyoming. Don't forget that.
Yeah. He's attractive.
It's a lovely guy, and there are buffalo in Wyoming. That's a positive. And the other thing is, these places get stereotypes. Even when I was there, people kept saying to me, well, people think Wyoming is, but the fact is Wyoming is as diverse and crazy and nutty and, mixed up as anywhere else you could go. So I found it really lovely. I found it a beautiful place in many ways.
Wonderful.
Beautiful people.
Yeah, I bet. So, despite all these positive things, you sued the only four-year institution in Wyoming.
Four-year educational institution.
Oh,
there are
okay.
many prison institutions that go way longer than 4 years.
Very good, very good. Yeah. That's what I meant.
I was invited 6 months ago to give a named lecture at the University of Wyoming. And as it got closer, as often happens with me, the right wing got kind of crazy, sending emails. My image of this is that two guys with a bottle of scotch living in one of their mother's basements sends out emails to the university with kind of escalating threats. So the university got dozens and then hundreds of threats that if I spoke there, somebody was going to do damage to me and to the institution. And the university got nervous, more and more nervous, and finally, 4 days before I was to speak there, they canceled my talk. I explained to the students who I was in touch with that in my view, I wasn't the injured party, because I can speak, I'm speaking to you, I speak to my children. I was
going to protest this interview, but I couldn't get my stuff.
Exactly. I talk to myself morning, noon, and night, and so it's not my speech that's being abridged. The problem is the students who wanted to talk to me, it was their speech that was being injured. So we had this conversation for a week or so, and then this very courageous and interesting, fascinating young woman, who I'll tell you about, named Meg Lenker, decided she wanted to sue. So I put her in touch with a lawyer in Denver, and she brought a suit which I joined, and so I became kind of the named person in the suit, but it was in fact Meg's suit. And the suit was that I have a right, I have a right to free speech. And what Meg did that was so interesting was that she asked several places to get venues on campus where I could speak. And every one that she approached said yes, and then 40 minutes later said no.
Right.
So it was clear that there was a pattern from the top. Eventually Meg got in touch with the chief counsel for the University of Wyoming, and the woman, in a kind of patronizing way, this chief counsel said to her, listen Meg, I know you mean well, but there are no circumstances under which we would ever let Professor Ayers speak anywhere on campus. She put that in an email. So we went into federal court on Monday, and the judge, after I was examined and then cross-examined, the judge said he had a few questions for me. His first question was, or his first comment really was, I was a Marine commander in Vietnam for two duties, 2 tours of duty, and so you and I are on the opposite sides. And I said, with all due respect, Judge, I don't feel that I'm on the opposite side. I mean, you were there and you thought you were fighting for me, and I was here and I thought I was fighting for you. So I don't see it as two opposing sides. And he said, okay, well, why are you so hated? And I said, Judge, if you know someone who hates me, you have to ask them about that, because my experience is not that. And he went on to kind of talk about my vita and the things I'd written and stuff like that. And that was the end of it with him. In any case, he's a right-wing judge, and he issued the strongest possible statement in defense of my right to speak. And he said, among other things, that the university had no right to charge extra money for security because that was their business.
Yeah.
He said, in contradiction to the president of the university, he said, there's no way that you can allow security concerns to trump the First Amendment.
Yeah.
And the killer sentence is, he said, if the First Amendment can't live on an American campus, where can it live? So I felt like, you know, he issued a great statement. I went up Wednesday, gave a talk Wednesday night. Probably if I'd given the original talk, I would have had, you know, 20 students or 50 students or something.
Yeah, but like, so now, this is just to stop you, like, the scene is set, right? Like you won this heroic case for free speech, and all these people are like, oh, shit's gonna go down, you know, like it's gonna happen. There's gonna be all the kinds of it's warfare is gonna happen at the University of Wyoming. So then you get there.
Well, this has been my experience everywhere, but what happened in Wyoming is instead of 50 students, I had 1,200 students, and it was in a gymnasium, and instead of you know, the barbarians at the gate with torches and pitchforks, there were 10 protesters who seemed pretty meek and mild. One of them said that he was there because he heard I was a friend of Obama's and he hates Obama. So, you know, I mean, it's like, you know, where are you guys? I mean, I think that, you know, one of the things that gets confused, and it was confused there, was that people think that an invitation is an endorsement, which it clearly isn't.
Right.
When I was at the University of Michigan as an undergraduate, we invited civil rights activists, we invited the leader of the Communist Party, we invited the leader of the Nazi Party. Not because we agreed with anybody, but because we wanted to have a conversation. So the idiocy of the Wyoming administration, it was clear, and the judge actually noted this. He said, you can't bow down to a heckler's veto, but nor can you bow down to a donor's veto. So a donor says, I won't give you money if you allow this person to speak. You have to say, I'm sorry, you don't understand what a university is. And when I was in Wyoming, one of the questions that I got from a media person was, but isn't it true that if somebody gives money, they have a right to have some input into what gets said? And I argued just the opposite. Absolutely not. You have a right to have your name carved on the building, or on the, you know,
your logo is on the program.
Yeah, exactly. Or the downspout if you're fixing the infrastructure. But you don't have a right, actually, you give $1 million and then you say, and I'm choosing this professor. And not only that, I'm choosing this book that he will use in the curriculum. And not only that, I'm writing the final exam. That misunderstands completely what a university is. And so that notion that the judge argued that this is a protected space, that we can't actually violate it with either fear or temptations of money, was very important. And frankly, what they were protesting and what these folks were, you know, saying about me had nothing to do with the content of what I was going to say. And this has been a pattern also, Robbie. So I spoke, and the first person who got up said, I can't disagree with anything you said, but, you know, somehow I disagree with you. Well, I'm not interested in defending me or my history or anything else. Of the maybe 30 questions that I got, only 2 were kind of hostile, but neither one of them, it seemed to me, was off limits. I mean, in other words, people have a right to say anything they want. The other interesting thing about the kind of protests that went on is it's not like there's any unanimity. People think that things like the Tea Party movement is some kind of unified force, which isn't true even a little. So some people were wearing Glenn Beck shirts, right? I went up to one person who, some were Glenn Beck and some were Ron Paul. I went up to a Ron Paul person and I said, I'll bet you and I could agree about a lot of things. And he said, like what? And I said, like, we could probably agree that homosexuals deserve full civil and human rights. He said, absolutely. I said, including the right to marry. He said, no one should get married. And I said, I agree with you. So suddenly we were in complete agreement. Standing next to him was a woman with an American flag and a Bible. And she said, I don't agree with that at all. And I said, why don't you talk among yourselves, you know? So, you know, it's not like there's a unanimous position.
Wow, that was an interesting little conversation.
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah, so the Christians have to fight with the libertarians and so on. But my point is that there's a lot more kind of middle ground, not middle ground, it's more like if you frame the arguments correctly, it's shocking how much you can agree with a lot of people that you might think in some stereotypical box that you would profoundly disagree with. It's not true. We have to make the arguments in a way that is embracing and generous.
Well, thank you very much for coming out, William.
Wait a minute, I was fucking around.
Yeah, the camera was on the whole time.
I thought you said it was off.
Yeah.